Due to Doctor Who's very nature of travelling anywhere in time and space, different stories and locations each week, it has had an ever-expanding roster of guest stars over the past 58 years. Some actors take a role on the show out of love and nostalgia. Others, like John Sim, take the role so that their children will actually be able to watch their parents work without fear of bad language or sexy scenes. Not everyone holds the show in such esteem, however, and there have been a fair few guest actors who aren't overly thrilled to take part in the show, and even those that are sometimes have particularly strange requests in order for them to get into character as all manner of alien weirdos, historical figures, and intergalactic tyrants. This list collects a range of actors who've appeared in the show over the past 5 decades, charting their unusual requests, vanity, eccentric motives, and incredibly demanding performances. With that in mind, I'm Ellie with Who Culture, and this is 10 most unusual demands made by Doctor Who guest stars. Number 10. Vi Delmar negotiated a separate contract for her teeth in The Pirate Planet. Vi Delmar was an English character actor who'd pop up in everything from Carry On Cowboy to Dr. Finley's Casebook. Born in 1902, Delmar was in her mid-70s when she was cast as the aged Queen Xanaxia in the closing 2 parts of Douglas Adams' Doctor Who debut, The Pirate Planet. Queen Xanaxia, of course, was the true villain of the story. In an attempt to remain youthful, she plunders the galaxy for rare minerals to power the time dam that sustains her. Trapped in the final few moments of her life, she is defeated by the Doctor, who warns her that there's not enough energy in the world to sustain her existence forever. In order to better portray this wizened old queen, Delmar was asked to remove her false teeth by director Pennant Roberts. She refused to do so, and ended up negotiating an extra fee to appear on screen without her falses in. According to IMDb, this was her final on-screen credit as an actor, but Delmar lived on until 1994. The fate of her false teeth is unknown. Number 9. Nicholas Briggs disagreed with how the Daleks were written in Doomsday. Nicholas Briggs is so entwined with the Daleks now that a whole nation responded to the executioner's line, "I am not Nick," with "Yes you are." On top of this, he's the voice of the Cybermen, the Jadoon, the Zygons, Skaldak the Ice Warrior, not to mention his extensive work with Big Finish. Briggs is one of the few figures to have been with Doctor Who since 2005. He's the monster guy. He has a ring modulator. He's the Dalek expert. So much so that during filming of the Series 2 finale Doomsday, he disagreed with how the dialogue was written. Reading the script, Briggs felt that Dalek sex sounded like he was jarringly in conversation with himself, and that the lines would be better split between Sek and another Dalek. Director Graham Harper agreed, and they sought permission to change the script as written. Is Briggs paid by the Dalek, or just a flat rate for voice work? If the former, then this was a sneaky little move for some extra cash, but it's more than likely to be the latter, and he just really knows his Daleks. Number 8. John Kane's method acting nearly barred him from filming in Planet of the Spiders. John Kane's performance as Tommy in 1974's Planet of the Spiders is a bit of its time. It's not a particularly nuanced portrayal of a character with learning difficulties, though the script does have its heart in the right place. When Sarah exclaims, "You're normal," after his miraculous interaction with the Great Crystal, Tommy simply replies, "I hope not." Kane was predominantly a theatre actor at the time of filming, and would get into character on his way to the first day of shooting. Adopting Tommy's voice, he asked the taxi driver to take him to where they made the television programs because he was on his way to meet his friend Doctor Who. On arriving at TV Centre, the taxi driver alerted a security guard who told Kane that the TARDIS had left and Doctor Who would wave to him next time he was on telly. Kane turned down the driver's offer of a lift back home and eventually had to remonstrate with the guard to be allowed inside to start filming. Number 7. Simon Callow insisted Dickens be treated with respect in The Unquiet Dead. Actors will sometimes avoid roles that may damage their reputation, often by being connected with work that doesn't appear worthy of their talents. Simon Callow is slightly different, and was reticent to appear in The Unquiet Dead because he was fearful that it would sully the reputation of Charles Dickens. Having written about the author and having played him in a one-man show, Callow is a proper Dickens scholar, and was uncomfortable with the idea of him being a guest in a Doctor Who story. His fears were rooted in the idea that the author is often deployed as a cheap way to add some Victorian character to a ropey old period piece. He'd clearly seen what Doctor Who did with H.G. Wells in Time Lash. So so Callow was adamant that the script be respectful to the Dickens legacy. He was therefore pleasantly surprised when he realised that Gatiss was almost as big a Dickens fan as he was. Callow was drawn to the script that saw the author worry about his legacy and his value as he nears the end of his life. It's one of the great Doctor Who performances and was perfect to relaunch the series' historical adventures. Number 6. Kate O'Mara swapped Hollywood's sunshine for a damp gravel pit for Time and the Rani. Kate O'Mara always brought a bit of Hollywood glamour to Doctor Who in the 1980s. She only appeared twice, but the character was such a hit with fans that anytime a big-name female actor is cast as a villain, she's immediately rumoured to be the Rani. Keeley Hawes and Michelle Gomez were certainly speculated to be new incarnations of the villainous Time Lady. To date, she's not made a return, perhaps due to how Kate O'Mara made the role her own. Indeed, O'Mara was very keen to return to the role for 1987's Time and the Rani, in spite of her success in the USA in popular soap Dynasty. She also had a few requests for executive producer John Nathan Turner when she wrote to him, "I can't stand the eternal sunshine. You've got to help me. I want to be in a gravel pit somewhere in the pissing rain, changing in a caravan in front of 20 nosy crew members." Whilst the hours and hours of location footage on the new Blu-rays don't dwell on her changing room arrangements, she certainly gets her wish for a soaking wet gravel pit. Number 5. Paul Darrow was out for revenge against Colin Baker in Time Lash. Actors take on roles for all manner of reasons. For Paul Darrow, he accepted the role as Tekka in Time Lash purely out of a thirst for revenge. Back in 1980, Colin Baker had made a scene-stealing appearance as the villainous Baban the Butcher in the Blake 7 episode City at the Edge of the World. Darrow felt that Baker's bombastic performance upstaged him on his own show. He's not wrong, it's a role that lives long in the memory and has now spawned a Big Finish spin-off. Darrow decided to return the favour 5 years later on the set of Time Lash. Nathan Turner had cast him to play the role of the collaborator Malin Tekka in the same cool anti-heroic manner that he played Avon. Darrow declined this offer and instead decided to perform the part as if he was Shakespeare's Richard III, hump and all. Director Pennant Roberts declined the hump, but Darrow proceeded to exaggerate his performance in what is one of the most memorable Doctor Who guest turns. And at least Colin Baker got some good convention stories out of it. After all, it could have been worse. Stephen Burkoff was also in contention for the role of Tekka, but much more about him later. Number 4. Anthony Ainley's bald cap mishap in Time Flight. If you believe Tom Baker, and thousands wouldn't, then master actor Anthony Ainley was bald as a kneecap. The master's jet black hair was unsurprisingly a wig. Anecdotally, he was very sensitive about his baldness and would insist on his makeup being done in private. Ainley's sensitivity over his baldness reached ludicrous heights during the production of 1982's Time Flight. For reasons that are never made clear, the Master is disguised as the mystical Khalid, a bald racist stereotype for the benefit of seemingly nobody. Of course, to wear the heavy latex and makeup used to cover up his appearance, Ainley would have to remove the wig. No deal. He insisted that the makeup artist fit the bald cap over his luxurious black wig. Christopher Lee was similar. He refused to remove his wig for his role as Mycroft Holmes in The Private Life of Sherlock Holmes, until he was eventually convinced to by the director Billy Wilder. Ron Jones, the director of the much derided Time Flight, had no such luck with Ainley, despite warning of the unbearable heat he'd have to deal with. Number 3. Anton Differn preferred tennis to Doctor Who in Silver Nemesis. Anton Differn was a prolific German character actor who had fled Germany in 1939 to live and work in Canada, the US and Britain. Often playing Nazis in the movies following the end of the war, he appeared in genre classics like Where Eagles Dare and also starred in Jerry Lewis's infamous Little Scene concentration camp clown film The Day the Clown Cried. By the late 80s, Diffring was in his 70s and very much still working. Doctor Who's 25th anniversary special Silver Nemesis centred on a battle between the Cybermen, a Nazi and his private militia, and two Elizabethans to obtain the mythical Nemesis statue. It's up to the Doctor and Ace to stop them. And who did the Doctor Who production team have in mind for the aging Nazi? Why, Anton Diffring, of course. Diffring was completely unaware of Doctor Who and had never seen an episode. He took the role on though, not because he was a late convert to the magic of the show, but because the shooting dates coincided with Wimbledon and he could watch the matches between shoots from his hotel room. Number 2. Davros smokes inside a paper bag in Genesis of the Daleks. No disrespect to those who came after him, but Michael Wisher was the definitive Davros. Even Evil doesn't shout, it whispers, he famously noted, and it's this hissing menace that brings the creator of the Daleks so chillingly to life. A eugenicist who is absolutely convinced of the purity of his own race above all else. The darkness of Davros and Terry Nation's inspiration from the dark subject matter of the Holocaust is at odds with the frankly crazy way that Wisher prepared for the role. Knowing that he would be encased inside a rubber mask to play the part, he decided to rehearse his lines whilst wearing a paper bag on his head. The idea was that the bag would prepare him for the restrictive experience of wearing the Davros mask. Wisher was also a prolific chain smoker and cut 2 air holes in the top of the bag to allow him to smoke whilst wearing the very flammable paper bag. Something which would never in a million years happen in an age of health and safety legislation. When it came to playing Davros on set, Wisher had a peculiar costume decision. Beneath the black leather tunic, he wore a kilt and knee pads in order to feel more comfortable in the Dalek shirt. Number 1. Steven Berkoff's never-to-be-repeated role as the Shakri in The Power of Three. In an interview with SFX magazine, The Power of Three director Douglas McKinnon rather diplomatically stated that you could ask anyone on the cast or crew and they'll agree that his participation was extraordinary. As the years have passed, some details have come out in various fan circles that suggest this is code for he was an absolute nightmare to work with. Allegedly, he refused to act, delivered lines in bizarre ways, and threw numerous tantrums. The day's shooting with Berkoff was virtually unusable, and Chris Chibnall had to hastily rewrite dialogue to work with what they could salvage. The Shakri was never originally intended to be a hologram, but Berkoff's stock-still performance necessitated such a rewrite. In an interview a few years later, Berkoff complained about being worked to death and spending the majority of his 15 hours in the makeup chair. Perhaps by the time he'd been made up as the Shakri, he was ready to go home. It's no excuse for unprofessional behaviour though. The biggest laugh is that McKinnon had worked with Berkoff before. One can only imagine how he'd have behaved with an unfamiliar director. And that concludes our list of the most unusual demands made by Doctor Who guest stars. If you can think of any others that weren't mentioned in this video, then comment them below, and while you're there, like and subscribe and tap that notification bell. Don't forget to head over to Twitter to follow us there. I've been Ellie with Who Culture, and in the words of River Song herself, goodbye, sweeties.